Welcome to another edition of Talk City Greensboro, produced by GTN, featuring interviews and events happening around town. It's an easy way to stay in the know while you're on the go. Subscribe to Talk City on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or SoundCloud so you can keep up what's going on in Greensboro city government. I'm your host, filling in for Josh Johnson today. I'm Devin Smith, and alongside me is our senior producer, Carlos Castellanos. How you doing today, sir?
Good, and I'll be filling in for you.
Yes, you will be.
What's up, Greensboro? We have an amazing guest for you today. You may have watched her conversation with Shirley Fry for the MLK Junior Day program. She was awarded the 2021 Leadership Greensboro Service Medal. She's one of 4 co-founders of We the People International. On the podcast today, we have writer, speaker, dancer, and community leader, Dr. Zitty Nxumalo. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Absolutely.
So, tell us your story about how you became an activist.
Sure. Before I do that, I want to let you know that the X in my last name, it's not the same as the X in xylophone. It's a click. So it's actually Nxumalo.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
He said, okay, I'll try that later.
Let me try that.
Yeah.
Nxumalo.
Nxumalo. Yeah.
Okay.
Come on, Carlos. Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, I never wanted to be an activist because, I was raised in Greensboro from preschool on up. And one, I'm a sensitive soul in general. I get super involved in all the things. And I know that in the world of activism, the issues that people deal with are even more intense than like a traditional workplace environment. And so I didn't want to be a part of that because I know my own personal sensitivities. Also because just like any group of people that are labeled in a particular kind of a way, I know that there's a certain kind of filter that people put over you and certain assumptions and judgments that they place on you once you get a label like that. And for me, I'm a truth-telling person, which is not popular in some spaces. And in the activist world, we've seen historically that makes you a target. And so there were safety issues related to that. I just didn't want the smoke. I wanted to, figure out how to use my gifts in other ways. But the way that I got the label was at the beginning of the summer. I was working in the School of Health and Human Sciences over at UNCG. And my friend Princess Johnson, who owns Royal Expressions Ballet, she connected an anchor with WFMY to me to interview me and asked me how people could be better allies in Greensboro. And so I had like less than an hour to prep for that interview. We had it, and then boom, the headline. It may have been like the subtext that had the word activist, and so it was on and popping after that.
So when I wrote the question's actually in quotes. So
yeah,
I
should have prefaced that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, all good.
It's like activist.
Right.
Yeah, and so now that you're saying that, it just seems like you wanted to be someone who was involved, right?
And I have always been involved. That's just the thing. Like, I've been engaged in the community for years. I have a natural proclivity toward volunteerism. I've always been engaged in that way. I've just been more under the radar, I suppose.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just not heavily involved. I've not marched yet. This summer was the first time I did that, so...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what is it that you aspire to do within the community?
Yeah, interestingly enough, I just recorded another episode of my own podcast, Ukuvusa, right before we got here. And I was speaking with the guest about that with her. I like people. The reason I got my PhD is because I stumbled upon the work of Brene Brown. I didn't want to be a PhD before that because I didn't want to be separated from the people,
Yeah.
And so I saw Brene Brown, who talks about belonging, connection, identity, vulnerability, empathy. Yeah. And as an immigrant, that's all I've ever wanted, was to feel like I belong somewhere. And so everything that I've done in my career and in my personal life, I just really like curating and being parts of environments where everybody feels like they're a part of it, regardless of what their background is, what their abilities are. And so, it reflects in all the different things that I've done.
Absolutely.
Okay. You do some of these things through some of your organizations. Can you tell us about, was this?
Deftable.
Deftable. Thank
Yes.
you. Deftable and We the People International?
Sure. Well, Deftable is my consulting business, and it's a made-up word. I like the word deft, D-E-F-T. Mm-hmm. It means to be skilled, to be agile. And so everything that I do through the business is about communication and leadership, figuring out how to be skilled and clever and agile in those two areas. Those are the two areas that I studied in my graduate education. And so what that's evolved into now is that I'm doing quite a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion training for organizations that are trying to be agile during this time where everything is coming to light and people don't want to be HR is a lot more tense because we're living in this information age, and so now people are afraid of being exposed, and so it's like, oh shoot, we've got to make some changes because no company wants to be part of a headline that talks about them not being, diverse, inclusive, all the things. And so my work with Deftable also includes transformational coaching. I've got a leadership certification with the Center for Creative Leadership, and so I work with a lot of leaders who are at some sort of like a cusp, like ready to either go for the next big job or working with people instead of projects for the first time. Anybody who is just ready to move to the next level. And so I love, love, love working with people who are in some sort of a transformational space. Do you want me to go ahead and talk about We the People?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, this summer, after I became an activist, apparently, I connected with a longtime friend of mine, Brandon D. He and I have known each other for over 20 years. And over the course of time, we've had many different conversations about what we want to do in the world, who we are becoming, who we desire to be. And when George Floyd happened, the pandemic hit, we found ourselves in Douglas Park in East Greensboro for a Juneteenth event. And Brandon is actually responsible for bringing together me, AJ, who's Anthony Morgan, who's also known as Free Dope Major, incredible leader in the community and has been at the forefront of many of the most impactful protests here in Greensboro. And then the fourth co-founder being Latasha McCorkle, who also has a podcast called Bridging the Gap. And she's been involved in a lot of governmental leadership groups, including Greensboro's Criminal Justice Advisory Commission, Guilford for All at the county level, and then the Carolina Federation at the state level. And so the four of us got together with all the different skills and experiences that we had and figured out that, we co-founded it this September. And we ended up getting a $5,000 grant from the Community Foundation to start a music education project called People Over Politics. And so through that project, we were able to involve Greensboro artists. We were able to involve Greensboro citizens in the filming of these educational music videos. And the main reason why we want to heavily incorporate entertainment as a part of this civic engagement work that we're doing is because entertainment has been one of the most effective ways through which we've all learned information. I mean, I tell people all the time I still remember all 50 states in alphabetical order because of a song that I learned in second grade at Peeler Open School. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, one of the other areas that's changing drastically is education. I'm an educator. I'm a professor as well. How are we going to adjust? How are we going to be agile during this time so that we're still educating Black youth, Black young adults through all the things that are happening, and then doing it together? So
yeah. And speaking of that, it's Black History Month.
Yes.
And so how do you think that we can begin to kind of change this narrative around race and diversity and equity in the community?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you, Devin. A lot of that I'm figuring out as we go along. You've got some schools of thought that are really abolitionist, in terms of completely overhauling systems or completely separating, Black people from other people, and we are caring for ourselves. There are others who believe that we can't really move forward as a society until we're able to do it together. I've got thought in all these different areas. I think that we definitely need one another. And when I take an honest look at my life and my upbringing, and I think about the people that I've connected the most closely with, the people who've had the greatest impact in my life, my honest truth is that they look all kinds of different ways. They identify in many different ways. they're all different kinds of ethnicities, and what I'm drawn to within people is their energy. And so my approach, even when I do my own diversity, equity, inclusion training, I talk about history and the importance of history and how we can't just ignore history in the way that it impacts the present. But then ultimately I talk about each of us as individuals and what small commitments we can make every day to be a part of this co-creation of a new future. And so, in terms of equity, equality, diversity, obviously there are certain, we're all born, but we're born at different places. We got different starting lines. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We're born into a world that was created by other people, and they made rules that made things unequal from the beginning. So now that we're adults, how are we going to fix those inequalities, which are really inaccuracies? When we talk about like white supremacy, for example, it is scientifically inaccurate to say that because my skin is black, my intellect is inferior, or because, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I like to approach these topics from a scientific perspective, because that addresses the skeptics who, think about things as, unicorn and rainbows. It's not just like kumbaya that we can dismiss. There's literal evidence that talks about, the commonalities that we have regardless of what the skin suit looks like. And I don't know, I'm just leaning more toward that and focusing on that and emotional intelligence and concepts that transcend all of these different separations. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, really just having empathy at this point for each other is a good starting
Compassion,
point. And not to like go down a dark rabbit hole, but a lot of people do feel like, well, everything's fine now. Like if you look at the laws and if you look at everything in the way that the country sort of operates now, if we were to all just start now, it would seem like America's a pretty great place to be. But if you like add in the history, if you add in what has happened in the past, and that stuff wasn't that long ago. And when you factor all of that in, it doesn't matter if everything is fair now. You get what I'm saying? Because all of that still plays a factor into how things are shaped. Like you said, we all have different starting lines depending on maybe where we were born at, or how we're affected by either the school system or anything like that. There's a lot of different variables that have been put in place because of either history or because of the way the system used to be. It doesn't matter if you change it to make it equal now, but you don't go back and rectify the problem before, if that makes sense. So it's, like I said, I don't want to go down a dark rabbit hole.
Yeah. And can I just say one quick thing?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say, like, even last night, right here in Greensboro, there was a vigil that was held in honor of the lives that have been lost through gun violence. This past weekend was particularly violent in Greensboro. And to your point, many of the inequitable laws, rules, policies that existed in America before have a direct impact on even people's psychosocial orientation toward the world, because the world has a particular orientation toward them as well. And I have seen with my own eyes differences in life trajectories, and it's impacted by these weird systems. So it's great that you're experiencing the world in America as more fair and more equitable, but I will say that for many people, they're definitely not there yet. So
yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I like the way the scientific approach, the way to look at it. It's very, because I mean you can't debate evidence.
Yeah, literally. Yeah.
If people want to reach out to you, support any initiatives you're involved in, how can they do that?
Sure. Well, through Deftable, I have an email. So it's Zitty, Z for zebra, ITTY, at deftable.com. So that's D for David, E, F for Frank, T for Tom, ABLE.com. That's the best way. And then also, if you go to the Deftable website, which is www.deftable.com, there's a tab for services. And if you click that, you can fill out a quick form that'll send a little bit of information to me. Let's say if you want like a 15-minute consultation to see if I could do some transformational coaching or be of benefit in workshops, you can fill out that form. It's like 30 seconds to complete that. So those are the two easiest ways.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for coming and sharing a piece of your mind and giving people some insight about you and hopefully where we can go in the future as people together.
Yeah.
Thank you all for having me.
Thank
This
you.
is great.
Thank you. Well, stay tuned in by subscribing to Talk City Greensboro on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. And don't forget, you can download the podcast from SoundCloud.
That's it for this week. Thank you for tuning in to Talk City. Be sure to watch GTN, your official source for news and information about the city of Greensboro. GTN is available on Spectrum 13
and AT&T Channel 99.
and North State Channel 31.
GTN is also available on Roku and the city's website at greensboro-nc.gov. Have a good one.